Take what you want, she sobbed. The rancher smiled, and did something never expected, Wild West. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the plains. Zane Carter stood near the edge of his ranch, a figure of solitude. His home was a sprawling stretch of land at the edge of a small frontier town, one that rarely saw the outside world beyond its borders. The dust clung to the air, and the only sound for miles was the distant hum of a hovercraft passing overhead, a reminder that the Wild West had changed, yet remained the same in its heart. Zane wasn't a man who sought attention. His weathered face and dark hair, touched with streaks of gray, made him look older than his years. He had never been one to chase fame, nor had he much care for wealth. His life was about the land, the cattle, and the wide-open skies. For the past few years, he had lived alone, keeping his distance from anyone who might ask too many questions or try to dig into the past he preferred to forget. But today was different. As Zane walked back to the ranch house, he spotted something that made his brow furrow. A lone figure was approaching, making their way across the dusty trail that led up to the ranch. Zane squinted against the setting sun, wondering who it could be. No one from town would venture out this far without a reason. The woman's silhouette was faint against the orange sky, but as she drew closer, Zane could make out more details. She was tall, her features delicate, but worn from the heat and travel. Her clothes were simple. Ripped boots, a long coat that looked too heavy for the weather, and a scarf tied tightly around her neck. She walked with purpose, but with a sort of weariness that suggested she had been traveling for a long time. Zane stopped in his tracks. He had seen enough people come and go to know when something was wrong, and this woman had the look of someone desperate. She was no ordinary traveler. He couldn't say why, but something about the way she held herself made him feel uneasy. As she drew closer, she stumbled slightly, as if her legs could no longer carry her. Zane's instincts kicked in. He moved toward her, his hand instinctively reaching for the blaster holstered at his side, more out of habit than anything else. When she saw him, her face showed no fear. Instead, she smiled faintly, though it was a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm sorry to bother you, sir," she said, her voice soft but strained, like she hadn't spoken in days. Zane stood still, his eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" he asked, his tone flat and steady. "My name's Selena," she replied, her voice trembling just enough to give away the exhaustion that was starting to overtake her. "I need help, please. I have nowhere else to go." He could feel the tension in the air. Something wasn't right. He had learned to trust his instincts, and they were screaming at him to be cautious. "What kind of help are you asking for?" Zane asked, his voice guarded. She took a shaky breath, looking up at him, her eyes filled with desperation. "I'm running from them. My family, they're trying to force me into a marriage I don't want. They'll do anything to bring me back. I can't go back. I need somewhere to hide." Zane's eyes flicked over her for a moment, scanning for any sign of deceit. His ranch had been a place of peace for too long, and he wasn't about to let someone pull him into trouble, no matter how much pain they seemed to be in. "You've got a lot of nerve walking onto my land like this," Zane said, his voice steady but firm. "I don't take kindly to strangers. You should have turned back when you saw the ranch." She shook her head quickly, her hands clutching the coat around her tightly. "Please, I didn't know where else to go. I've been on the run for days. They'll find me if I don't stay hidden." Zane studied her carefully. Her fear was genuine, but something about her story didn't sit right. He had heard enough tall tales from travelers to know that people didn't always tell the truth. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this woman's story than she was letting on. He didn't trust easily, and he wasn't in the business of helping anyone who wandered onto his land without good reason. But there was something about Selena's eyes, a flicker of vulnerability, that made him hesitate. "I can't help you," he finally said, his voice a little softer than he intended. "Not like this." Her face fell, and Zane saw the flash of panic in her eyes. "Please, I have no other choice. I'm not asking for much, just a place to stay for a few days. After that, I'll leave. I swear. I can't go back there." For a long moment, Zane stood there, unsure of what to do. He had enough trouble of his own. He didn't need to get involved in anyone's family drama, especially not someone like this, who could easily bring a world of trouble with her. But still, the desperation in her voice gnawed him. He glanced over at the barn and then back to her. The day was fading fast, and night would come soon. "Fine," Zane said finally, his voice cold and firm. "You can stay the night, but tomorrow you'll leave. Understand?" Selena nodded vigorously, relief flooding her face. "Thank you." Thank you so much. Zane led her toward the barn, his mind still turning over the situation. He didn't trust her story, but he wasn't heartless. There was something about her, a quiet desperation that tugged at him. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he would keep his guard up. The woman followed him in silence, her steps lighter now, as if the weight of fear had been lifted, at least for a moment. Zane couldn't help but wonder what kind of trouble she was running from, and why she had chosen his ranch of all places to hide. As they reached the barn, he turned to her, his expression hardening again. You stay in the barn tonight. There's water and some supplies inside. I'll bring you something to eat. Selena nodded and stepped into the barn, her back hunched as she walked in, as though she were trying to disappear into the shadows. Zane watched her for a moment before he turned and headed back toward the house, but as he walked, a thought lingered in the back of his mind. He had offered help, but only time would tell if she could be trusted. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a soft orange glow across the ranch. Zane woke early, as he always did, before the sky had fully lit. His boots hit the wooden floor with a quiet thud as he stood up from his bed, running a hand through his dark, weathered hair. It was going to be another long day of work, but there was something different about the air today. A new weight hung over him, a lingering thought that refused to be ignored. Zane made his way down the stairs of the ranch house, the familiar creaks of the wooden floorboards underfoot comforting, as they always had been. He grabbed a coffee from the pot on the counter and stood by the window, staring out over the land. The cattle grazed lazily near the barn, and everything seemed calm, almost too calm. His eyes drifted toward the barn where Selena had stayed the night. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. He had agreed to let her stay, but only for one night. He couldn't bring himself to turn her away while she was clearly in trouble, but he didn't want to risk his ranch or his peace for someone who might be trouble. With a sigh, Zane set the coffee mug down and left the house, walking toward the barn. He needed to know more about her situation. The sooner he found out, the sooner he could make his decision about what to do next. Selena was already outside, standing by the old fence near the barn, staring out at the wide-open plains. The wind blew her long coat lightly, and her dark hair blew in the breeze. She looked smaller in the morning light, like a stranger in a world she didn't belong to. Zane noticed the way she held herself, tense and alert, as though she was still expecting someone to come after her. Selena turned to face him, offering a small, hesitant smile. Morning. Thank you again for letting me stay here, she said quietly, her voice still strained but softer than the night before. Zane nodded, crossing his arms over his chest. He studied her for a moment, unsure of what to say. You said you were running from your family? What's that about? He kept his voice neutral, but there was a sharpness to it, a need for answers. Selena looked away, her gaze drifting back to the horizon, as if searching for something in the distance. I didn't have a choice, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I was raised by a powerful family in a colony that doesn't believe in freedom. They control everything. My father arranged a marriage for me, and it wasn't a choice I was allowed to make. I tried to escape, but they're not people you can run from. They'll stop at nothing to get me back. Zane frowned, his eyes narrowing. That doesn't explain why you ended up here. Why come to my ranch? Selena paused, taking a deep breath before turning to face him. I heard rumors. People in town said you were a man who stayed out of the way, who didn't get involved with other people's business. That made you the safest person to come to. I didn't know where else to go. Zane studied her for a long moment, his jaw tightening. So you thought it was a good idea to walk onto my land and ask for help? She nodded, her eyes full of guilt. I didn't know what else to do. Please, I'm not asking for much, just a few days. That's all I need. Zane let out a long breath, exhaling slowly. He couldn't ignore the unease that gnawed at him. His instincts told him that there was more to the story than what she was saying. People didn't run away from powerful families without reason, and even if he didn't trust her fully, there was something in Selena's eyes, something that made him feel sympathy despite himself. You can stay today, Zane said finally, his voice hardening, but I need you to understand something. I don't let people take advantage of me. I'll give you a place to rest, but I expect something in return. If you want to stay here, you'll work. Selena's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't protest. I'll do whatever I can, she said quickly, as though the idea of working was more of a relief than a burden. Zane nodded, his stance softening just a little. You can start by helping with the cattle. We need to get them moving to the other side of the ranch. I'll show you what to do. She smiled faintly, grateful for the opportunity. Thank you. Zane turned and began walking toward the barn, motioning for her to follow. They worked in silence, moving the cattle to the far side of the ranch. Selena's hands were trembling as she helped guide the animals, but she didn't complain. She worked hard following Zane's lead as he explained how to handle the cattle and the logistics of the ranch. Her movements were awkward at first, but she quickly picked up on the rhythm of it. It seemed like Selena was willing to do whatever it took to make herself useful. She didn't ask questions, didn't make excuses, she just worked. By the time the sun was high in the sky, the job was nearly done. Zane looked over at Selena, who was wiping sweat from her brow, her face flushed from the heat. For the first time, he saw her in a different light. She wasn't just a stranger in need of help. She was a woman who had been thrown into a difficult situation, just like him. Zane stopped and looked out at the horizon, the familiar vastness of the land stretching out before them. The ranch was his home, the one place where he had found peace. He didn't want to get involved with someone like Selena, but as the day wore on, he realized that she wasn't just looking for safety. She was looking for a way to take control of her own life again. "This might be a lot more work than you're used to," Zane said, breaking the silence as he wiped his hands on his pants. "But if you're willing to pull your weight, you'll have a roof over your head as long as you need it." Selena looked up at him, her eyes full of gratitude. "I'll do whatever it takes." Zane nodded slowly. "We'll see about that." He turned to head back to the house, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between them. For the first time in a long time, he found himself intrigued, not just by her story, but by the way she carried herself, her strength, her determination. They worked the rest of the day in silence, the ranch growing quieter as the evening set in. When the last of the cattle were moved, Zane led Selena back to the barn where she had been staying. He didn't speak much as they walked. The air between them felt different now, more comfortable, but still full of unspoken questions. "Thanks for everything," Selena said quietly as they reached the barn door. "I know I'm asking a lot, but you've given me a chance." Zane turned to face her, his face unreadable. "Don't thank me yet. You still have to prove you can handle it here. But for now, you can rest." "Tomorrow's another day." Selena nodded, her shoulders slumping in exhaustion. "I'll be ready." Zane watched her go inside, the barn door creaking softly as it closed behind her. He stood there for a long moment, thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. He had offered her shelter and a chance to work, but the truth was he had given her more than that. In some small way, he had given her hope. And for the first time in a long while, he realized he was beginning to care about something more than his ranch. The following days passed quickly, filled with the steady rhythm of ranch work. Zane woke early each morning just as the first light of dawn began to stretch across the horizon and set to work on the ranch. Selena, for her part, had settled into the daily tasks, never complaining, working hard every moment. Her initial awkwardness had faded, and now she moved with confidence as she tended to the cattle, helped with repairs, and managed the small chores Zane had assigned her. There was no question now. Selena had earned her place on the ranch. Zane kept his distance, not entirely trusting her story, but the work needed to be done, and she was proving herself useful. He noticed the way she threw herself into the tasks, the quiet strength she carried. She never shied away from anything, no matter how difficult. Every day it became a little clearer that she wasn't just someone running from her past. She was determined to make a future for herself, no matter what it took. But Zane wasn't a man to let his guard down easily, especially not when it came to matters of trust. He had been burned before, and it was better to keep things simple and professional. Still, as the days wore on, he found himself paying attention to her more than he cared to admit. Selena had a quiet grace about her, a softness in her movements that contrasted sharply with the hard edges of her past. One evening, after they had finished rounding up the cattle and completed the usual evening chores, Zane found himself standing outside, gazing at the stars that blanketed the sky above. The cool breeze of the night blew through his hair, and for a moment he allowed himself to relax. The day had been long, but the quiet of the ranch was settling over him. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Zane?" He turned to find Selena walking toward him, her figure silhouetted against the fading light. She looked more at ease than he had seen her in days. Her hair was tied back loosely, and there was a faint smile on her lips as she approached. "I didn't know if you'd still be up," she said. "I wanted to thank you for all the work you've given me. I know I'm still a stranger, but it means a lot." Zane took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. He had grown used to her presence by now, but there was always that little voice in the back of his mind, reminding him that she was still a risk. Still, he found himself speaking with a little less edge than he normally did. "You've earned it," he said, his tone gruff but not unkind. "I didn't think you'd be so good with the cattle." Selena's smile grew a little more. I didn't think I'd be either, she replied softly. I've never worked on a ranch before, but I guess you just do what you have to do, right? Zane nodded, his eyes returning to the vast stretch of land before them. The stars were brighter tonight, the silence of the night wrapping around them both like a blanket. There was something about the quiet moments like these that made Zane feel less alone. He didn't have many people around him, and he preferred it that way. But with Selena, it wasn't uncomfortable. She wasn't demanding, she wasn't asking for anything more than what he was willing to give. Still, he couldn't ignore the nagging thought that there was more to her than she was letting on. I've been thinking about your story, Zane said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. Selena's eyes flicked toward him, and for a moment her expression seemed to harden. I'm not asking you to believe it, she said quietly, her voice sharp. I'm just asking for a little time. I didn't say I didn't believe you, he said, his voice steady, but I've been around long enough to know that people don't always tell the truth. You don't get to the position you're in without making some enemies along the way. Selena's expression softened, her gaze dropping to the ground. I understand. I didn't expect you to just take me at my word. She paused before looking up at him again, her eyes searching his face. But I've got nothing left. The family I'm running from. They'll find me. They always do. Zane took a step toward her, his gaze unwavering. You're not the first person to run from something. Hell, I've done it myself. His voice grew quieter, almost to a whisper. You don't get to forget your past just by running from it. But sometimes you have to find a way to make peace with it, or it will catch up to you. Selena's eyes met his, and for a moment the weight of the conversation hung between them. There was a shared understanding, a silent connection that neither of them had expected. They were both running from something, trying to rebuild their lives in a place far from everything they had once known. She took a deep breath and nodded, as if coming to a decision. I'm not asking for a place to hide forever, Zane. I just need a chance to breathe. Zane studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as he considered her words. Then, without warning, he smiled. It was a rare thing for him, but something about the way Selena had spoken, the honesty in her eyes, made him feel like he could trust her just a little. All right, he said, his smile widening just a bit. I'll give you a chance. You've earned it, Selena, but I need you to do one thing. No more running. If you want to stay, you work with me. We're in this together, or not at all. Selena's eyes softened with gratitude, and for the first time Zane saw the real relief in her face. It wasn't just about staying on the ranch anymore. It was about a chance to move forward. A chance to make something of herself and maybe, just maybe, start over. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You don't know what this means. Zane nodded, his face serious but warm. Don't thank me yet. We've still got a lot of work to do. But for now, we'll start fresh. The silence between them grew comfortable again as they both turned to look at the ranch, the land stretching out before them. For Zane, it was the first time in a long while that he had allowed someone else to stand beside him, to share in the work, the weight, of the life he had built. For Selena, it was the beginning of something new, a chance to build a future on her own terms. As the stars flickered overhead, Zane and Selena stood together, the past and future merging beneath the endless sky. The days had become routine, each one blending into the next as Selena and Zane worked side by side, the rhythm of life on the ranch slowly becoming their shared reality. The tension that had once hung between them had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet understanding. Selena, who had once been a stranger with no place to go, was now a part of Zane's daily life. He couldn't say exactly when it happened, but somewhere along the way she had stopped being just the woman who came to him for help and started becoming something more, a partner, even if neither of them had put a name to it yet. Zane didn't know why he kept her around. Maybe it was because she had proved herself day after day, working hard without complaint. Or maybe it was because, for the first time in years, he didn't feel so alone. Whatever it was clear that Selena had become a fixture in his life, one that he didn't want to lose. But despite the hard work they had done together, the quiet had a way of amplifying the tension that lingered. Selena had started talking less about her past, and Zane didn't press her for details. It was obvious she was still haunted by something, some shadow that clung to her no matter how hard she tried to shake it off, and Zane couldn't help but wonder when the other shoe would drop. One afternoon, while the sun hung high above the ranch, Zane was working in the barn, repairing one of the fences that had been damaged by the last storm. Selena was nearby, brushing down the horses with a quiet focus, her movements steady and precise. The soft sound of her work filled the air, along with the rhythmic clink of Zane's tools as he hammered away at the posts. Zane paused for a moment, wiping sweat from his brow as he looked over at Selena. She had become more than just a worker on his ranch. There was something about her quiet strength, the way she carried herself with dignity despite everything she had been through. Zane hadn't expected to feel this way about anyone again, but he couldn't deny it. He had started to care about her. He shook his head and went back to his work, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her. Was he just feeling sympathy for her situation, or was it something more? He didn't know the answer, but it didn't matter. She had proven herself time and time again, and that was enough for now. As the day began to wind down, Selena approached him, wiping her hands on her jeans. She looked tired, but there was a contentment in her eyes that hadn't been there when she first arrived. She had found her place here, and so had Zane. "Everything's looking good out here," Selena said, her voice light but filled with genuine appreciation. "The cattle are settled, the horses are in good shape. We've made a lot of progress." Zane nodded, leaning on his hammer as he looked over the land. "It's been a good couple of weeks," he said, his voice steady. "You've done well, Selena. I couldn't have done it without your help." Zane studied her for a moment, something flickering in his chest. He had been careful not to get too close, to keep things businesslike. But the truth was, they had already crossed that line without either of them realizing it. Selena had become a part of this place, and part of him. "I think you've earned more than just a place to stay," Zane said after a pause, his voice quiet but firm. "You've earned a future here, if that's what you want." Selena's eyes widened slightly, her heart quickening in her chest. She had expected many things in the weeks she had spent on the ranch: help, work, even a chance to get away from her past. But this was more than she had hoped for. For the first time since she had run away, she felt like she was finally being offered a chance at something that wasn't just survival. "You mean that?" she asked, her voice soft, almost disbelieving. Zane met her gaze, his expression serious. "I do. You've earned it. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life, but if you want to stay here, work here, there's a place for you." For a moment, Selena didn't know what to say. She had spent so much of her life being controlled by others, running from the demands of her family, constantly fearing what would happen if she didn't comply. But here on this ranch, Zane had given her the freedom to choose, to carve out a life for herself without fear of being told what to do. It was the first real choice she had ever been given, and she wasn't about to waste it. "I want to stay," she said, her voice steady now, filled with determination. "I want to make something of myself, something that's mine." Zane's lips curved into a small, approving smile. "Good," he said simply. "We've got plenty of work to do, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way." The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was the perfect end to a long day, and yet it felt like the beginning of something new. For the first time, Selena wasn't looking over her shoulder. She wasn't thinking about her past or the family that had tried to control her. She was thinking about the future, a future that she had the power to shape. As the night settled over the ranch, Zane and Selena stood together, looking out over the land. The stars above were beginning to shine, and the quiet of the night wrapped around them like a soft blanket. Zane felt a sense of peace that he hadn't known in years. This place, this ranch, had been a refuge for him for so long. But now, with Selena beside him, it felt like it was becoming something more. It was becoming a home, not just for Zane, but for both of them. Selena glanced up at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Thank you, Zane," she said quietly, her voice full of gratitude. "For everything." Zane nodded, his expression softening. "You don't have to thank me. You've earned your place here. Now, let's make sure we build something worth fighting for." The ranch, the land, the future, it was all theirs now. And together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead.